Hello everyone and welcome to my review of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the final race of the first triple header we had so far this year. And overall, the race I thought was pretty good. It wasn't a barnstormer, but it was still interesting enough. And I'm happy that we're moving away from these 3 a.m. and 1 a.m. races. Of course, Miami for me is actually 6 a.m., but then we're moving towards those 11 p.m. races in Europe, which are much better for my sleep schedule. So anyway, let's dive into this race. And of course, we have to start with the start of the race, which is what basically won Oscar Piastri this race here. And that was his actual start. Not turn one, but his start, because his start was good enough to allow him to get ahead and get that inside line into turn one. If Verstappen had got a better start, he could have covered off the inside line, but he didn't. Piastri got a good start and was able to basically dictate terms going into turn one. As per the rulebook, Piastri had the right to this corner. He maintained his car under control and he got to the apex first and he was always ahead. I know Christian Horner provided some stills that was saying that Max Verstappen was ahead, or that showed Max as being ahead, but that was not at the apex of the corner. And I would argue Max probably rolled off the brakes to maintain a higher minimum speed, which meant he wasn't going to make the corner, but made it look like he was going to be ahead at the apex anyway. Red Bull chose not to give back the position to Piastri as they didn't think he did anything wrong, and as such he was then given a 5-second time penalty, which would have been 10 seconds but for the mitigating circumstances that it was turn one at the start of the race. So what are my thoughts on this incident? It's pretty simple. To me, Verstappen did deserve this time penalty as per the letter of the rules, which we actually haven't seen because it's an undisclosed document, which is very annoying. So it means it's hard to make these types of videos, but I think that Verstappen was carrying too much speed into turn one in order to make the corner. Yes, Piastri didn't leave him any room, but Max was never making that corner, in my opinion, in the first place. Of course, we didn't get to see it play out. I would like if the racing rules could be changed, because I think Piastri should have had to leave a car width, or at least for Verstappen, on the outside there, because he didn't. If Verstappen had slowed down more, he would have been run out of room, but Verstappen was never making this corner, I think. And the penalty, Verstappen did gain a lasting advantage, in my opinion, from this, irrespective of the incident at turn one itself, because they went into turn one side by side and Verstappen came out of turn one / turn two with a second lead, basically. They went in side by side and Verstappen was ahead on the exit by cutting the corner. So if they'd exited side by side and raced into the next corner, maybe, but Verstappen still decided to cut the corner and not give back any of that second advantage. Basically, he didn't drop back to being beside Piastri. He kept that, which is where I think this 5-second penalty is fair. Hopefully that makes sense, but let me know your thoughts on this incident down below. It basically decided the Grand Prix at this stage. Verstappen and the Red Bull he was driving had pretty good race pace. He was able to keep within touch of Piastri in his second stint after they pitted. Both drivers started on the mediums and moved to the hards. Of course, Verstappen served his 5-second time penalty, which meant Piastri very easily jumped him. But Verstappen managed to close in that final stint. I think Piastri was holding back. But yeah, it was good to see Verstappen showing some great race pace, and he's always able to extract the most out of that Red Bull each week, no matter how good that car is. The other main incident we had was that lap 1 incident, which caused a safety car, meaning Saudi Arabia and Jeddah has a 100% success rate of having a safety car, I suppose, or 100% safety car rate in every Grand Prix so far we've had there. Racing incident, I think I'm happy with at this stage. Gasly put himself in a vulnerable position by going around the outside here, but I don't think he did anything wrong apart from making himself vulnerable. It was Tsunoda who I think drifted a bit wide, and if you had to put blame at anyone, it would have to be Tsunoda, because it's not like Gasly turned into the corner. It was Tsunoda who ended up drifting wide, but I'm happy they went with a racing incident. It's going to happen going into that corner. F1 cars are never going to go side by side with that. On lap 1, cold tires, heavy fuel. Contact was bound to happen, and unfortunately it did. Took both drivers out of the race, but yes, happy with the steward's decision on that one. I think they made the right choice. Leclerc was the driver that finished on the podium behind Verstappen and Piastri, and he drove an outstanding race, running very long on the first stint on the mediums, which put him in a great position to attack on the hard tyres and overtake Russell. It gave him a great tyre offset, and the Ferrari looked much better on those hard tyres than it did on the medium, so he'll be very happy with that result. And yeah, Russell was just struggling basically the entire second stint of this race. He tried to go with Verstappen, but that just burnt up his tyres, which meant he was very easy pickings for Leclerc and then eventually Norris too. Norris was the only front runner to start on the hards given his crash in qualifying, which I'll quickly touch on. He shouldn't be making that mistake. He was quicker than Piastri and Verstappen all weekend. He just had to keep a clean qualifying session. And on a weekend, I think he probably should have won the race based on their practice pace. He ends up only finishing 4th, while Piastri capitalized on what I think was probably his weakest race in terms of pace this entire season so far. So yeah, Norris will be kicking himself. He drove a good recovery drive, as I mentioned, starting on the hard tyre, going long and swapping to the mediums. He managed to jump Hamilton and Antonelli in his first stint, which put him in a good position for the second stint. However, he did have a couple attempts at getting past Hamilton, which probably cost him a shot at running down Leclerc in his second stint to finish on the podium, but he'll be happy with P4. It was a decent recovery drive, and he'll be really looking to bounce back in Miami, where of course he got his first Grand Prix victory there last year. I briefly touched on Russell and Antonelli. The Mercedes just didn't have the pace, so I think they should be happy with a P5 and P6 finish respectively. Russell just outqualified the car once again, did a great job, but didn't have the race pace to keep ahead of the Ferraris and Norris. And Antonelli, who still looks a touch behind Russell, just put together a solid race. No issues with Antonelli. They'll be happy. They'll be hoping they can get some performance into that Mercedes though, and allow them to really challenge the Red Bull of Verstappen and the McLarens of Oscar and Lando. Hamilton was the final driver to finish from the top split of the race, I suppose, or Class A or whatever we want to call it, and he had a shocking race. At times he was lapping over a second slower than Charles was. He just can't get his head around the driving style of this Ferrari. He said in order to drive the car, he would need a brain transplant, which I'm sure he's exaggerating, but it just shows that the adapting he's trying to have to do to get the most out of this Ferrari. I've still got faith in Hamilton. He's a great driver. I think he will be able to get on top of it, but only time will tell at this stage. So once again, he'll be looking to bounce back and recapture the highs of the Chinese Grand Prix sprint race. On the other hand, Williams will be super happy with their double points finish, with Carlos Sainz finishing ahead of Alex Albon. They'll be extremely happy. They both played a great team role at the end there, with Sainz lending DRS to Albon to help keep Hadjar, who finished in the final points paying position, at bay. It was great teamwork, and Sainz showed really good pace this weekend. The first time I think he's probably been on top of, or basically alongside in terms of pace, with Alex Albon. So Williams will be very happy, and yeah, shout out to Hadjar. He drove a great race to get into the points and take home a P10 finish. He'll be very happy with himself for that. On the other hand, his teammate Liam Lawson picked up a 10-second time penalty for a turn 1 move on Doohan, where he just ran wide, didn't give the spot back. He had that overtake done before the corner. He just took too much speed into turn 1, ran slightly off the track, continued on, and the stewards gave him a 10-second penalty. Didn't affect his race too much because he didn't finish in the points, but again, it's just a small mistake he shouldn't be making. He should have just given it back and overtook Doohan on the next lap again. And final shout out of the day has to be given to Fernando Alonso, who had a great save as Bortoleto cut across in the braking zone for turn 1 after letting another car by, I forget which one, and Alonso made an absolutely fantastic save. Of course, Alonso is Bortoleto's manager, so Alonso jokingly said he wouldn't be getting dinner on his plane on the way back, which I found rather amusing. But yeah, great job from Alonso showing his reflexes. Also, Lance Stroll now has the most Q1 knockouts out of any driver in history. Of course, Lance Stroll isn't that bad of a driver. He's always had decent but not great cars, and he's had some terrible cars, of course, but it just shows how long he's been in the sport, and honestly, I think he probably should have moved on by now, but yeah, anyway, interesting fact. Overall, though, the race was all right. I'd probably give it a 6, maybe a 6.5 out of 10. Again, I watched it at 3 a.m, so the details are a bit hazy for me, but it was decent. Not a barnstormer. We didn't really have a battle for the lead because of Verstappen's 5-second penalty. Piastri was in no rush to really try and overtake him in the first stint and could easily undercut him. But yeah, I love Jeddah. It's a great track. It's great to watch the cars fly through. And after watching the F2 race and the F1 Academy race, it was crazy seeing how fast those Formula 1 cars actually are. I'm very much looking forward to a nice week off, and then we head to Miami, which is probably my least favorite US circuit on the calendar behind COTA and Las Vegas, but that's all right. Hopefully the racing is good. Hopefully we get some tire wear. Hopefully it's a big strategy race. Hopefully we get a battle for the lead. But I'm very excited. The championship battle has swung Piastri's way now. He's leading for the first time ever in his career, and the first time for an Australian since 2010 with Mark Webber. So very exciting. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and let me know what you would rate the race out of 10 down below, and have a great rest of your day.